Welcome back to Morning Prime on this second day of March 2023. As I said, we are inching closer to the close of the first quarter of the year of 2023, and a lot more to discuss right here on the show with my guests. I am still on set with my guest here in studio, that is Odhiambo Ramogi, an economist, as well as Professor XN Iraki, who is from the University of Nairobi, as well as John Karani, Chair of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management, and finally Sako Bunyasi, an economist and Chair of the Kenya Vision 2030 Secretariat. Gentlemen, as you know, continue refreshing yourselves with some, the cups of tea and coffee and everything else. The cost of power in the country is one that has gone up quite, considerably, quite notably so, because even from a very basic point of view, when you look at the amount you pay for some, Kenya Power tokens, I'm trying to retrieve that conversation, or rather that, I seem to have lost it. But, when you look at the amounts that are charged, so little goes into what you would consider the amount that you'd actually be credited for buying for power, in such that, there is a certain amount that seems to be going somewhere. When you break down into it, because Kenyans wonder, whenever you buy tokens, say, of 1,000 shillings, you get certain X amount of tokens, whereas ideally that should be double. Where is this money going?
Well, I think the cost of electricity in this country is an interesting subject. First of all, I found the statement by my senior, Professor D, to be despicable, to say the least, that reduction of power costs was not part of the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, while in fact there is an alluding of the same in the same manifesto. You cannot tell us that you want to attract manufacturers and that you want to ensure that you lower the cost of living. And you're saying that in the process of doing this, however, the cost of electricity will have to go high. I think that is unfortunate. But what is also unfortunate is the fact that KPLC seems like they want to take advantage of the scenario and really inflate the cost of electricity, which is now making it very uncompetitive in terms of investment in manufacturing, in terms of even just getting electricity in the rural areas. I applied the other day for electricity and I was given a bill of 600,000 to get electricity in my local Simba. in Siaya. So the cost of just access and even paying it is too much. The result of this is that we cannot manufacture competitively, and so China Center will continue to be there.
Even on power?
In other shapes. In other shapes. It could be the China Center or another center, but in other shapes. So we cannot manufacture. But at the same time, there are investments that we are losing to Ethiopia, to Uganda, and to other countries that are have more competitive power costs, including Egypt. So that in terms of investments, we are also losing investments. And I'm thinking business, because at the individual level, the inflation issues are already too much. And I hope that we'll talk about inflation and the whole issue of exchange rate before we leave. Because that then becomes the begging question. Are we out to build the economy with this high cost of electricity regime, or are we then to just take advantage of the scenario and charge Kenyans as much as we can and benefit a few individuals?
And talking about charging as much as you can, I mean, from a sample of KPLC tokens of worth 1,000 shillings, when you look at the units, gentlemen, it's 50.76 units. And so the breakdown is the token amount 390 shillings, VAT 116 shillings. The issue comes with this fuel energy charge, which is 334 shillings and 51 cents, forex charge 93.92 shillings, EPRA charge 1 shilling 52 cents, WRA charge 42 cents, And then the REP charge 19 shillings and 54 cents. And then the inflation adjustment 43 shillings and 14 cents. When you look at that fluctuation and that breakdown, Prof, are we getting any better? Whereas there has been the conversation, to be touted of a marginal drop to 20 shillings per kilowatt, in July 2024, because it's currently at 21 shillings. Why is slang would say, is the math not mathing?
I think despite spending many years studying economics, I find Kenyan power bill very perplexing. For example, there's something called, you've charged me for fuel and for exchange. Yeah?
Yes.
So when I take a matatu, I just pay my fare. Matatu never charge me for the fuel. So why does Kenya Power charge me for fuel? So I think then we need to look at the pricing, the way we price power, because there are too many extraneous charges that makes it very expensive. But number two is the Kenyan power industry doesn't seem to defy the rules of economics. Because for the last 20, 30 years, a lot of power has been fed into the system, but the price should be going down. We have now power from Ethiopia, we have a lot of geothermal, a lot of wind power, a lot of solar power. So why is the power not going down? And it's not just the power that you pay, it's not the bill that you get that is going up, even connection. I saw the other day somebody asking to be connected to his house, a residential house, which is about 30 meters from the nearest post. He was given a bill of 100,000. So if you are going to charge me so much to connect power, then so much to consume power, then the best alternative is for us to start thinking of solar or alternatives. There are people in this country who are next to power lines, but they have decided that we use solar because they have become too expensive. But when you look at it from macroeconomic point of view, we are becoming a very uncompetitive country. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we have China Center is because it is cheaper to manufacture outside and come and retail than manufacture here. Because power is a very important input. So I think the new government must look at ways and means of reducing the cost of power in this country. And it's even more perplexing because why should power be going up when every government says they want to reduce power?
Yes.
The former government said they want to reduce the cost of power, they will reduce the cost of power. Now the current government is saying the cost of power is going to go up. And I think it's not so much an economic issue, it's probably a regulatory political issue. I have a feeling that power sector is too much politicized. It's probably the time we read the rules of economics, supply and demand work, and the cost of power will go down. No question about that.
Yeah, I mean, Chairman, what would be your input on this whole, trying to bring the cost of power down?
Yeah, so it's good to look at and my fellow colleagues have said this, the overall picture. What drives industrialization? Power is crucial. The other factors, of course, would be your issue around land, your issue around natural resources, your issue around capital and all that. When I always like giving the case study of a country called Ethiopia, neighboring Ethiopia. They're doing something quite right. They decided to focus on 4 key things. And the first one is the dam, Renaissance Dam, energy. Today, Ethiopia very soon will become a net exporter of energy. Why do they do that? Energy, electricity, cheap power is a driver of economic revolution. Kenya, when you compare with South Africa, with Egypt, with all the countries around us, we're the most expensive in terms of energy. And that's a key driver of energy. I worked for a long time in Coca-Cola, where glass bottles is actually a high energy intensive thing. Companies are going to Ethiopia, relocating to Ethiopia to manufacture and bring glass here. Others are going to Uganda and bring products here. It's cheaper to manufacture outside, not just China, our neighboring countries. Now Kenya, the bastion of East Africa, is becoming soon be in trouble because of the regional economic blocks becoming more competitive than us. So there's something we must do right, and that is actually, and the Prof said it quite well, when you look at the cost of power, what are the real makeup? What makes up the actual cost of power that you have? And if we can look at that quickly and then look at alternative sources, I always say this, we should actually zero-rate solar panels and all solar technology infrastructure because we have sunshine throughout the year. Can we make other aspects of power? Geothermal is right there. Can we make them more affordable? Can we make more reachable? Why is it that we cannot do this quick solution? We can generate our own power using the sunshine, using geothermal. diversify, and make it affordable. So that's a key driver of the economy. We have to do that.
Yeah, when you look at the cost of power again, would venturing into solar power, as it were, be an easier alternative for because that now appears to be an individual perspective or an individual effort, or should then there be ways of regulating and saying, okay, fine, this has been an issue for far too long, government in, government out. There has always been promises, but then it appears not to be actualized, and as we edge closer to trying to achieve these goals of Vision 2030.
Yeah. A couple of things. One thing, a general statement one can make is that as we worry about governance issues, economic governance issues in many sectors of the economy, the power sector is one in which we must have a deep look at. Two, a dominant player in that sector is the Kenya Power and Lighting Company. There are other source players, but on the distribution side and on the supply side, that's what we see. And for a long time, people weren't even sure whether it's a private company or a public company. That says a hell of a lot of this. So I really think that KPLC needs to get a competitor. We should free up power supply so that we can then allow, whether it's solar or other forms of green energy, for example, or whichever others might be, to flourish as well and compete with the modes that KPLC has been used. As it is, I think there's a high degree of protection, and that's why even if an educated person, such as those sitting around this table now, if you get electricity bill, it's very difficult to explain that electricity bill. And Professor Rakis always talk about the example of you're paying for fuel, you're paying for a forex adjustment, you're paying for an inflation adjustment. And you say, then what am I buying? What is the core price? What does the price comprise of, and so on? So I think that we have many ways in which, from the little things like simplification to opening up competition, so they get fresh air, as it were, to flow through, and also to unbundle ownership structures, make them more transparent. Who are the beneficial owners of KPLC? These little questions have been nagging people and so on. In other countries, there's been a competition, even with the same power lines that are owned. You're not going to put up your own power lines when you're a competitor. And this is it's a system thing. You do like they do fuels when we used to do to pump them from Mombasa when we had the refinery. You have hours and times when your fuel flows, and it will flow, and the system knows this is so and so, this is so and so. Same thing with power. They must get some competition. They are very unfair competitors. What KPLC vis-a-vis other suppliers, and I have live examples from Busia, how they try to undercut solar suppliers. We have had some NGOs that are bulk suppliers of solar. They do distribution in localities that are analogous to what KPL does in terms of doing the billings to homes and so on. But they are much more responsive. It's, of course, better energy. And they have influenced the country and parliament in many ways. And the laws are passed that just keep giving them protection, Why should you pay 100,000 shillings to connect power? And they want that business.
Yes.
You bring business to them and so on. So I think we just have not confronted it, because I think we have not analyzed carefully who are the gainers and perhaps who are the losers with the reforms in the power sector.
The inflation, as you have something to add, Prof?
No, I saw a report in today or yesterday's paper that President Ruto has allowed new IPPs, independent power producers, to start supplying power. And I'm curious to know whether that is going to raise the cost of power or lower it down.
It's going to raise the cost of power.
So that's my concern.
Yes.
He appears to have
I told you the politician, so he knows more than me most of the time.
Why would you think it will raise it?
Because the issue is not supply of power, because we have too much power than we need. In fact, we have idle power that we are paying for, being supplied by the existing IPPs. And so now, when you bring in new IPPs into the game, and you tell these guys, give us power, but you already have idle power that you're paying for. These ones will come into the foray, and you will have more stringent and disadvantageous contracts with them, and you will have to pay for the idle power that they are producing. And so that means that the cost of just access to power for KPLC is going to go high. And at the end of the day, you and I are going to cater for that cost, because KPLC will just add it there where you see fuel charge or
IPP cost.
Yes, IPP. They never say IPP cost, but they call it fuel charge or something. That 300 bob is going to their IPP. And that 300 bob today for 1,000 shillings will be 500 bob tomorrow. And so I think and I fear that it's going to increase the cost of power.
Let me just insert something very quickly.
Yes.
The cost of power per unit of IPPs between the lowest and the highest is a factor of 11 times. And you can see that therefore the either negotiating skills or the parties involved must have an inside track to it. And all of the lowest one is about twice what the hydro cost would be. Then it starts around 11 cents, and the last time we looked at it with some depth about 18 months ago, the highest then was about 66 cents per unit. Extremely high.
Yeah.
Extremely high. And if that were just made public, who are the owners, beneficial owners of the APPs, it would be a shocking revelation.
Okay.
It feels like another case of it's our turn to eat, if you ask me.
Let me just add one thing about the issue around KPLC. You know, the government actually made them do tariff cuts, but promising them to pay them, I think, 14 billion.
Yes.
But they've only paid, I think, 6.5, just half of that. What impact does that have on the cost of energy? So that the relationship right there, what can be done by the government again to pay up KPLC, you know, the promised amount for tariff cut, so to maintain the reduction in cost. So it's something we should put on the table.
Yeah, gentlemen, you did see the conversation on the front page of the newspaper, of the standard newspaper, that is, the inflation, and, you had mentioned, talking about the inflation and the exchange rate, because that's what I want us to focus on this segment. And according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the overall year-on-the-year inflation rate, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, was at 9.2% in February 2023, and as the rise in inflation was largely due to increase in prices of commodities under food and alcoholic beverages that stood at 13.3%, housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels 7.6%, and transport 12.9% between February 2022 and February 2023. Gentlemen, when you look at the rise in inflation, first of all, at a time that globally there is a conversation on global recession, how worried should Kenyans be?
Very. And I think the story, especially the conversation by Brian Ngugi on page 4, tells you that McDonald Obudo, the KNBS director, is saying things are only going to get worse. And that is a government officer that is telling you prepare for worse days ahead. Let me say something about inflation. And I know this will sound like academic pontificating, but I have to say it. If you look at the inflation figures in December, and even before that, and January and February, you find that there are two components that are contributing to the inflation a little higher than the others. And these two components are the whole issue of fuel and the whole issue of food prices. And so these ones tend to move faster in a higher direction than the rest. But now the Cabinet Secretary and, of course, CBK tend to use one tool to fight off inflation, which is interest rates, monetary tightening. And it's usually a lazy way of managing inflation. And I'll tell you that because there are other options in terms of the supply, in terms of fiscal policies, in terms of there are other options, mopping from the economy, borrowing. But most of these guys use monetary tightening to ensure that they manage inflation. They have managed to increase in interest rates as early as December. And 3 months later, we are still where we used to be because it's not working. You are fighting this by trying to manage demand. When you increase the interest rate, what you are managing is demand. You're telling people that we are trying to make things more expensive for you so that you don't buy it as much, so that then the demand goes down and then now the things will be cheaper. But this is not working because the issue is not demand. The issue is supply. We are not producing food, so we have to import. Almost all our food is being imported right now. And we are also importing fuel. This is why the two are high, and the major contributing factor on these two is the whole question of foreign exchange. And now there are rumors, I know they are not established, there are loud rumors that we are devaluing our currency to make the exports attractive. And so you are compounding an already existing supply problem by bringing in the whole issue of very expensive forex. And so I think we are not getting it right in terms of inflation. I think we need to have more emphasis on local production. I think we need to consider even subsidizing a little more, because I don't think subsidizing fertilizer is sufficient to ensure that our food production is okay. We need to think about storage, we need to think about transport, we need to think about the whole value chain of agriculture. And we need to do that very quickly. I will leave it at that.
Prof. Exaniraki, in your Faculty of Business and Management Sciences, are you, even at a personal level, before we get to the whole conversation on inflation in the country, when you look at how you're even perhaps driving the conversation and topics of inflation in your classes, perhaps, are you finding it quite different from what you would have even been used to in the past?
That's a good question, because you probably should ask me for my age. Because I've had a lot of episodes of inflation, some of them worse than this. I always tell a joke, and people don't believe, that when I went to KU in 1988, I took a bus from the city bus station to KU. And I would like you to guess how much I paid in 1988. Just guess.
5 shillings.
5 shillings. You want to guess? You must have been a toddler by then.
No. Let's not call each other names.
Yes. You are younger than me. I can bully you.
I know you are my senior, but let's not call each other names. I think maybe 2 bob and 50 cents.
I paid 25 cents.
25.
Oh.
Then came golden bag. And you know what happened? Yes. So we have had very bad episodes of inflation. So if you look at the Kenyan economy in the last 10 years, they seem to have been very stable inflation-wise. So when prices start going up, people become very worried. And it is worse when there's inflation and there's drought. There's war in Ukraine. We are recovering from COVID. And remember, something that we always forget in this conversation, Kenya always was at war with terror. So we have 4 things that are driving our economy, that is shocking our economy. So when you bring that, and then you add tax rates, tax going up, you can see why people are fearing that inflation will go up. And in conversation, even on the streets, people are very worried about the high prices of goods and services. And you saw other people coming and hedging on that, like Raila Odinga saying the cost of living has gone up. And it is interesting that when you are discussing all this, there's something that nobody is mentioning very curiously, that we should raise the wages and salaries. Nobody's talking about that, which is very strange. Because I think the government knows and everybody knows that if you raise the salaries and wages, inflation will even go further up. So this is the elephant in the room, and we must confront it. And there's no easy way, because when you raise the interest rates, I know people will not demand as much as expected, but there will be jobs lost, and nobody wants to do that. So in the long run, you need to probably increase the efficiency. In the long run, you need to increase the supply, so that if there's more food, if whatever you want to do to the market, if there is more supply, the price goes down. So, but what we are seeing in terms of inflation is both external and internal factors that are making the price go up. But what is making it worse? The political part of it.
Yes.
Because people are saying there is inflation. We should have brought the prices down. And the economists here will know that changing from President Uhuru Kenyatta to President Dr. William Ruto was not sufficient enough to bring down the prices. The conditions that brought these prices are still there. So maybe what should be telling Kenyans is that I don't want to believe that things are very bad. I would only tell them to be patient. Things are not very good. They may not be very good in the short run, but in the long run, the economy will adjust. We just need to be patient.
One would wonder, Prof, when you say patience, how long would this patience work? Because we are a country that is not known for very good patience skills.
Maybe I should replace the word patience with resilience. Okay. Maybe we should become more resilient because the circumstances that are bringing this inflation are not going away anytime. For example, if you look at the meteorological department forecast for rains, we don't expect rain in the next 3-4 months. So the price of food will still remain up. We don't expect Ukraine and Russia to come to peace the next 1-2 months. So the price of oil will remain high. Maybe in the long run, we shall get used to high prices the way we got used after Goldenberg. But I hope we shall not get there. But what also worries me most, and he talked about it, is the exchange rate. When the dollar is so strong and the Kenyan shilling weakens, and we're importing so many things, then we compound the problem. So the government has work cut for it.
Bwana Chair, when you look at even the whole importation conversation and the exchange, I had some rumors somewhere we could be looking at 170 against the dollar very soon.
I hope not.
There was a rumor that against other rumors that we've had of the high exchange rate of the dollar, of the dollar against the shilling. Even as we look at the international scope and trading internationally, is it is it a dark picture, or are we looking at some place, as Prof is saying, we develop some resilience for some time before venturing into the international space?
Good. First of all, Kenya is not alone in this world. The issue of a strengthening dollar is global against all other hard currencies. The dollar has actually been increasing. So it's actually one thing to crucify the government, but it's quite another to look at the global macro environment we're operating in. The dollar is strengthening against all major currencies. The other problem that's actually global is the drought. Whether you go to Europe, you go to America, you go everywhere, the rivers are drying up. It's actually, I think the global climate change is already there. So we are not an isolated case. Unfortunately, that's why the word resilience makes sense. How can we therefore, in the midst of these things that are beyond our control, they are global in nature, that are actually at play right now, how can we develop our own internal mechanism to start growing our economy? And it comes back to, and I'm happy that Mr. Ramogi has become baptized in this issue of agriculture, because that's one thing that we have. Much as the truth is we don't have a lot of enough rain for rain-fed agriculture, but I can tell you we have enough water in the underground. Can we therefore go and get that water and do agriculture in a way that's irrigation, through irrigation? How can we grow our own food, for instance? I keep saying, if a hungry nation is an angry nation, and as long as we don't have foodstuffs, food becoming expensive, we cannot. It's so sad. There's a country called Djibouti right next door to us. They are actually justified to import everything. They import everything, including the fruit. But we are not justified as Kenya. We have much better arable land. We have everything that has there for us to go, not to have to import. So question is, how can we put in place the requisite policies and infrastructure to support, as we say, it's not just fertilizer subsidies. It's a whole host of other things that can make our own homegrown economy driven by agriculture, which is the basis of industrialization. If we can become sufficient in food supply, I can tell you it will drive the rest of the things. Thank you.
Bunyasi, the whole conversation on inflation, how resilient do you think we are at the moment, even looking at what the future appears to be holding, the prospects for us?
I think we're resilient to the extent we are muddling through. We are surviving it. We're not perishing, as it were, on account of it. But also I think that it is even if you take a 5-year horizon, 3 years back, let's say, this is a bit of a blip goes up, it's bound to come down. Hopefully, when by the end of this major harvest seasons,
Yes.
I say seasons because they're different parts of the country, we should be able to bring down the cost of certain basic foods substantially, and food is a major component of this all. What I don't know is what will be happening in the energy sector, because fuel costs are likely may not come down in the same way as we expect. I don't know what the forex situation is going to look like, because we also do import inflation from there. But overall, I expect that, you said how soon, I think I would say personally, I think that if we give it over the next 6 months, we would have some harvest will come from the short rain season areas in lower eastern, many parts of lower western Nyanza, and then we'll remain with the highland areas who will be doing their harvest in October, November, and so on. So there are factors that will temper price increases throughout the year. So I don't think that we should get these spikes, unless there are totally unexpected factors. I want to conclude simply by saying there are some structural rigidities that government must also begin to address. And if I take the example of our colleague from Tanzania, when they harvest their maize at the peak, they can't move it.
Yeah.
There's not sufficient capacity to evacuate it from Tanzania to other places. And by the way, it was the same complaint in the 70s. It's not anything new. And you would think that in the rail expansion plans that we have got, including things around, let's say, meter gauge railways and others, that these areas, we made a start by improving the rail link to Nanyuki. I would hope that they would do the same and go down north into Kitale and give them that option, access. At the time, Kitale is at its lowest in terms of prices. The food prices in Okambani and Meru and so on are at their peak simultaneously. So just by movement, you temper the prices at high-end areas. So I think it will be temporal, it will be short. But I also think that government must have more options. One of the options that tempers prices is a basic thing. It would have to be imports. If the system can't produce enough, we should protect the consumer. We can't keep protecting the farmer only. Then some imports would be needed to be able to get a certain target pricing to be reached. As I speak now, hunger and price and famine in places like Busia, which are not obvious, and perhaps neighboring countries are the same, for the 2 kilogram maize, 2 kilograms of maize before grinding is now around 150, 150 shillings. A hell of a lot. And you need, I don't know, a couple of those to feed a typical family out there. And after you grind, you add another 10 to 20%, no, 10% on top. And prices were as high in some parts as over 200 shillings, extremely high. When pre-harvest, immediate pre-harvest prices are around 30, it's a huge increase. Government must work with a certain target before which, if it's hit, they must import and help lower the prices. Our farmers in Kitale can't have the luxury of keeping their stock sometimes a whole year into the next season because they missed the peak. They thought prices would go even higher and they begin coming down and then they don't know what to do with it. There must be a period at which you shock that system by either threatening or actually allowing imports in, and then they'll move it back to the market and prices will come down. There are ways in which, other than the financial instruments, there are these structural ways in which you can also put pressure on those who hoard, put pressure on the system, allow flexibility to import where necessary.
I'm seeing some feedback here. Bonachia, there seems to be a curious interest on, the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. The viewers are asking what exactly that you do, and perhaps you can even chip in even as we wind up on this conversation. Or exactly, your institute, does exactly, and checking into how, because we also look at counties, they are key players in management of resources, and it's what we are talking about, and how corruption feeds in, even matters of blockchain, supplies management, procurement, because this is where money appears to be getting lost, especially for the counties, because whereas we are talking about inflation and all these things, the Mwananchi, in the grassroots level, expects the county to be able to provide these services for them.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure always to say about what we do. Yes. We are the regulator of the professionals called procurement people. And there's a lot of negative narrative around procurement, as you know. But always I'm of the view that procurement it's got a lot of interest because there's so many interested parties. So we are the people who register, license, regulate, discipline, train, capacitate people in supply chain. And I want to talk about county, especially because this is where a lot of resources get either diverted or wasted because of what we call pending bills or stalled projects. Because when new leadership come in, first of all, their target is always procurement projects. How can they get projects that will benefit them? They prioritize projects that will go straight for themselves. And the other projects which were done by the previous leadership, if you want to be paid, you must do something. It's becoming a big source of another devolved corruption, as it were. When you say your project you wanted to be completed, it's caused people like the lady in Nyandarua who recently committed suicide because she, depression I think it was, she had done a project, but the new leadership comes in and they are not able to, not either unwilling or not able to pay her. So I'm saying this to say procurement of projects at the county levels have been politicized. Yet procurement really is a function of so many multiplicity of people. There's so many vested interests, starting from the governor himself to the departmental people, to the user departments and so on. The question therefore comes, how can we make sure that projects, whether it's for the good, the common good, so whether it's you who started or not, can you make sure it's completed as a governor? How can we address it at that root cause where it all starts by ensuring that this is a priority project regardless of which leader comes in, and ensure therefore that you sort out the payments. So it's not a procurement issue. It's a leadership issue. And we need to make sure that we work together in capacitating people to understand supply chain is the driver of the economy in many ways.
Gentlemen, we are winding up the show, but I'd just like to pick your final thoughts in just 2 minutes, and I'll begin with you as you wind up.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited about the idea of having cheap gas, tax-free, that will be reaching households very soon. And I wish that is implemented so that even though there are many things that we are complaining about, I think there is one or two things that are happening nicely. I pray that, the whole issue of China Center is resolved properly, because we covet more and more investments into the country, especially foreign direct investment. Majority of the corporates you see today are actually products of foreign investment. And I think the government needs to prioritize that and recognize that fact and support investors. I saw the letter from China embassy. It's not looking good. So we need to work on that.
Okay. Prof.
2 quick comments. I think there's one thing that I read in the media today or yesterday that was very exciting about getting the new debt ceiling, defining it in another way. Debt over the GDP, which is better than getting a raw figure like 10 million Kenyan shillings. The good thing about the new debt cap or the new debt ceiling, which is a percentage of GDP, is that if you want to get more debt, you need to grow the economy. And I hope our policy maker, the government, should do that, so that we don't just get debt for the sake of it, but because it is making the economy grow. And the most important thing as far as this conversion is concerned, we have spent about 3 hours talking about what the government should do. Yes. We should also ask Kenyans, what can you do for yourself? Because at the end of the day, the growth of the economy is not just about the government, but about you as an individual. What can you do to uplift your living standards beyond the government?
Yeah. Indeed. Chairman?
Yeah. I want to borrow from what Prof just said about the debt ceiling.
Yes.
I think our debt has grown from, 13 trillion now. Now they approved 17 trillion, I think. There's one saying that Obama said that what we are doing is actually we are paying interest, we are mortgaging our children's future. We are borrowing for 2, 3, 4 generations ahead of us. we should think about as we borrow. How will we repay it? Is there that capacity? But more importantly, I come back to the issue I've been talking about here. The future is actually bright if we can get our act right as Kenyans. Can we create a mechanism to become self-dependent in the areas where we are? There's a friend of mine called Dr. Adeshina from the Africa Development Bank. Yes. He's a real evangelist for agribusiness. How can we make agriculture a business? Incentivize all the people in the sector that we can actually grow our own food. We can feed the rest of the world. Today it's a shame to be importing food from Ukraine, which is at war. How can we therefore put in place a requisite mechanism to ensure that we as Kenyans become self-sustaining in food production? And that can start with ourselves. We can do something for ourselves, Prof, as we say.
Chairman, you get the last word.
Things that stand out for me, we must get a solution to higher education funding. It's an important area that we should look at critically. Secondly, government must focus on the short-term issues like inflation. The cost of living is indeed high, but I think that that's not surprising. And an economy like a human body, you manage it. Sometimes when you do well on one end, something else happens on the other end. You fix it and you fix it. That's how it is. You must just act like a doctor and be conscious of it. It's not a surprise that we are moving through a bout of inflation. I think it's been worse before, but that's just what you see. If you take a 5 or 10 year period, you'll find that prices shot up at that period and generally perhaps came down or remained up a bit, but they are not on a rising trajectory. So I think managing inflation in the short term will be, in the next 3-6 months, will be very, very important in my view.
Indeed, thank you so much also for joining on the show. I have been speaking to distinguished panel that is comprising of members of various institutions. I've been speaking to Odhiambo Ramogi, pardon, he's an economist.
Being baptized.
Odhiambo Ramogi, an economist. I've also been speaking to Professor KenGen Iraki from the Faculty of Business and Management Sciences at the University of Nairobi. John Karani, the chair of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management, as well as Sako Bunyasi, an economist, as well as the chair of the Kenya Vision 2030 Secretariat. I wish I could have time to go through all your feedback, because I'm seeing Gadongo Peter says, doing so much work does not reciprocate to earning more pay. Work smart, not hard. We take note on what to get most at a lowest cost and smartly invest in it. The most selling American products are not even made in America. By nodding or shaking, do you agree or not agree?
We can debate that.
Okay, it's true. Thank you so much for watching Morning Prime. My name is George Maringa. As always, stay safe and be kind to one another. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day.